Hi, welcome. Let me tell you what happened in this story, and why it reveals so much about us. Have you ever wondered why some women wait in silence for a man who never looks her way, only to be seen the moment she turns towards someone else? This is a story about that moment. When devotion turns its head, and the man who ignored her suddenly can't bear to lose what was never his to begin with. She was the kind of girl people overlook until it's too late. Not loud, not fragile, just quiet in her longing, soft in her hope. She lived in the edges of other people's stories, always the listener, the helper, the friend. Her name was Mara, and she had known Julian since she was 16. Julian, beautiful in that careless, devastating way. The kind of man who makes women forget themselves. He had charm like a sword, shining, dangerous, always in motion. The air shifted when he entered a room, and Mara's heart had been caught in that draft for years. He never looked at her the way she looked at him. Not then. To him, Mara was the girl who always showed up. Brought coffee. Remembered his favorite kind of silence. Asked how he was and really meant it. She was reliable, like gravity. Invisible, like it too. He talked to her about other girls. Showed her texts from models, cried once when his girlfriend left him. And Mara, she stayed. She nodded. She kept her hands folded and her lips still. There was always a part of her that believed, if I just stay long enough, he'll see me. That's the trap, isn't it? Some women become mirrors, so used to reflecting a man's pain, his dreams, his chaos, that they forget they have a face of their own. They wait for him to awaken, to recognize them as his missing piece. They don't realize, he was never looking. Julian wasn't cruel. That's what made it harder. He didn't ignore her out of malice. He simply didn't see her, because she never asked to be seen. But everything changed the summer his brother came home. Elias was not like Julian. Where Julian was fire, Elias was shadow. Where Julian played rooms like violins, Elias stood in corners, observing. A doctor, quiet, unreadable. Wounded in a way that didn't show. He had been abroad for years, and when he returned, Mara met him at the family's annual gathering. It was raining that day, and she wore blue. Julian was late, hungover, maybe. But Elias saw her first. And he didn't look away. It wasn't love at first sight. That's not how real stories go. But something ancient stirred between them, like two people who had once met in another life, in a ruin, under a different sky. His gaze didn't scan her, it settled. As if Mara was a question he didn't yet know how to ask. And for the first time in years, Mara felt her own name echo back to her. It was subtle, at first. A glance held too long. A question that lingered. A silence that felt safe. Julian didn't notice, because men like him rarely notice things that don't orbit them. Until they do. Until Mara started to laugh at someone else's jokes. Until she wore her hair differently, and it wasn't for him. Until Elias began standing a little too close. And suddenly, Julian did notice. Not with tenderness. Not with regret. But with something far older, more primitive, possession. You see, in Jungian terms, some men don't fall in love with a woman, they fall in love with their own reflection in her eyes. She becomes the anima mirror, the vessel of his unlived gentleness, his repressed need. And when she turns away, it's not her he's losing. It's the version of himself she made bearable. Julian wasn't grieving Mara. He was grieving the loss of being adored. But Mara was no longer available for worship. She had begun to see herself through Elias's gaze, patient, unflinching, without hunger. And that is when everything unraveled. Julian's shift was almost imperceptible at first, like the way the air changes before a storm. A slightly sharper tone. Questions with too much weight. The sudden, unexplained arrival of gifts he never bothered with before. "Mara, you've changed," he said once, eyes narrowing, not in admiration, but in confusion. as if the flower that bloomed without him was somehow unnatural. She smiled gently. "No, Julian. I just stopped waiting." It wasn't said with anger. Just a quiet truth, like a door clicking shut. You have to understand, when a woman who's spent years building a shrine to a man finally steps away, it threatens his entire mythology. He begins to sense, unconsciously, that he was never the god she worshipped, only a boy she mistook for one. And boys, they don't know how to grieve. They only know how to react. Julian's reaction was not grand. He didn't confess love. He didn't chase her in the rain. No. He became present. Too present. Suddenly, he was texting her first. Asking about her day. Offering to help. Laughing louder around her. Touching her shoulder when he passed. All those things she used to ache for. Now, they felt like shadows of something too late. That's the thing about timing. Sometimes love arrives, only after respect has died. Elias noticed, of course. Not because he was jealous, but because he had known his brother too long. He had watched Julian burn through people like seasons, and he knew the signs of territorial fire. One evening, Mara and Elias were sitting by the lake behind the family house. It was dusk. The kind of light that turns everything gold, even grief. Elias said softly, "He only sees you now because someone else does." Mara didn't respond at first. Then, "I know." And in that moment, something ancient passed between them. Not drama. Not seduction. But truth. Some men fall in love when they realize a woman is no longer theirs. Even if she never was. It's not love, it's ego. It's the soul's protest against irrelevance. Julian had never thought of Mara as his. But now, seeing her smile at Elias, hearing her laugh that unguarded laugh she once saved for him, it stirred the part of him that hated to be replaceable. He invited her to dinner, alone. She hesitated but went. It was a quiet restaurant, lit with warm tones. He complimented her dress. Said she looked beautiful. And she did. But Mara had learned, finally, that being noticed was not the same as being loved. "Why now?" she asked, voice like water under moonlight. Julian blinked. "I guess I didn't realize what I had until." "No," she interrupted gently. "You didn't realize what you lost. And I was never yours. It wasn't vengeance. It was awakening. And Julian?" He looked at her like a man seeing a ghost of the life he could have had. A life where he paid attention. A life where he listened. A life where he looked before she stopped looking back. In Jungian terms, this is the collapse of projection. When the anima, the internal image of woman, no longer fits the external reality. And the man, instead of integrating his emotional self, externalizes his hunger. He believes he loves her. But he only loves the way she made him feel. It's a mirror shattering. And shards cut both ways. Back at the lake, Mara sat beside Elias once more. This time, her hand found his without hesitation. And Julian? He stood at the house's edge, watching them through a window blurred by distance and regret. The girl who was once invisible had become a woman who chose not to be seen by the wrong eyes. And for the first time, Julian understood, she had always been there. He just wasn't ready to see her until she no longer needed to be seen. There is a cruel irony in love's timing, the way the heart learns too late what the mind refused to acknowledge. Julian's silence had been his fortress, his escape from vulnerability. But when Mara found warmth in Elias's quiet steadiness, that fortress began to crumble under the weight of something he could no longer command. Elias, the wounded prince of stillness, carried his own shadows, wounds that time had wrapped in layers of stoicism and restraint. Where Julian's fire burned recklessly, Elias's fire simmered deep, almost unseen. Mara was drawn to that silence not because it was empty, but because it was profound, like a well of unspoken truths waiting for someone patient enough to drink from it. You might wonder why Mara was so drawn to Elias, why the brother she never thought to notice held her gaze so differently. This is where the story brushes against the anima mirror, the place where the feminine self glimpses its reflection not in desire or possession, but in recognition and safety. With Jungian, Mara had been a reflection of longing, a face pressed against glass, reaching for a light that never came. But with Elias, she saw a quiet invitation to come inside, to be whole, to reclaim the parts of herself that had been muted by waiting. Imagine this, a woman learning to walk again after years of standing still. The steps are tentative at first, a mixture of fear and hope. But with each movement, her world expands, and so does her heart. Mara's transformation was not sudden. It was a slow unfolding, like a dawn that doesn't announce itself with fireworks but with the soft, persistent glow that promises new beginnings. Jungian noticed this change, and with it, his own inner tumult grew. The fire in him flickered between jealousy, regret, and an ancient ache of rivalry, the kind that Jung described as a battle not just between brothers, but between shadows within a single soul. He found himself haunted by Mara's laughter, by the ease with which she leaned into Elias's presence. It was as if the woman he had ignored had become a symbol of everything he lacked: emotional depth, the courage to be vulnerable, the grace to cherish without control. This rivalry was not merely external. It was the shadow of his ego, demanding recognition and possession, fearing abandonment not just of Mara, but of the self he wished he had been. And what of Mara? She was caught between two worlds: the fiery allure of Jungian, whose passion was fierce but fleeting, and the steady harbor of Elias, whose love whispered of healing and belonging. Her heart was a battlefield of loyalty and desire, fear and freedom. Do you know how many women find themselves here? Standing on the edge of love's divide, torn between the man who ignites their wounds and the one who gently tends them? It is here that the greatest lesson lies. Love is not about possession. It is not a trophy to be won or a prize to be kept. It is an awakening, a meeting of two souls willing to see and be seen without masks. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Mara stood before Jungian and spoke the truth that had settled deep in her bones. "I was invisible to you," she said softly, "because I refused to be what you wanted. I was waiting for a love that would see me, not for what I could give, but for who I am." Jungian's face tightened, the weight of her words settling like stones in his chest. For a moment, he was a boy again, caught in the ache of not being enough, not seeing what was in front of him. But Mara had stepped beyond that boy and his shadows. She had found in Elias a reflection of the self she had almost forgotten, strong, radiant, and free. And so, the triangle of love, rivalry, and possession resolved not in violence or despair, but in quiet acceptance. Jungian turned away, not with bitterness, but with a silent reckoning. Mara walked toward Elias, hand in hand, ready to live the love that honored her soul's deepest needs. In the end, the story is not about who wins or loses, but about the courage to see oneself, to see others, and to choose love that does not bind but frees. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever stayed too long, loved too deeply, or lost yourself trying to be enough, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Like it if you've ever been her. Comment if you've found your way back to yourself. And if you want more stories like this, rich in emotion, layered with psychology, and steeped in truth, subscribe for weekly narratives that don't just entertain. They dissect the soul. This is Psych of Love. We don't just tell stories. We uncover the why beneath them.